Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. And today I am joined by choreographer and pair skating expert Emily Tuttle. Emily, welcome back to the skating lesson. I have Olympic fever. How about you?
I'm getting there. Thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.
Well, Emily, I have you on because if there is someone who knows everything about pair skating and who someone skated with 12 years ago in novice, it is definitely you. So I need your perspective here on all of these pairs. I actually really enjoy pair skating. It used to be my favorite discipline out of everything. I think it's because I'm really obsessive compulsive, so it's fun for me. And it's definitely changed with the IJS, but I thought it was a really great competition. How about you?
Yeah, overall, I'm really happy with it. I think it's great that there was a convincing, clear winner,
Hmm.
which is always good for an Olympic Games. Yeah, I had a good time watching.
Yeah. What did you think of the scoring as we go into the top team? Because I was really perplexed by the scoring here. Obviously, people are going to debate that scores aren't important, that rankings are what's really important. And while I agree, I feel that the sport is really trying to push world records, seasons best, Olympic records. And I personally haven't really seen the judging at the Olympics be consistent with anything that we've seen throughout the year. So I think it is a bit confusing, although I'm not shocked that it's happened because I felt that it happened at the Olympics last time as well. But what did you think of Velocizar and Trenkov? How good were they? Because they had astronomical scores, obviously, in this competition, winning. What did you make of their performance and their marks?
Well, first of all, I was really pleased for them. They were
Mhm.
under an incredible amount of pressure, and it wasn't their best performance, but they got it done.
Mhm.
So, that being said, the program, I'm not on board with it completely. It's a program that is not as interesting as they are as skaters. So I do feel that they're underserved by it.
Mhm.
But there's no reason to really belabor it at this point. When you look at the protocol, though, I do think that it gets a little bit trickier. And when you look especially at Voloshyazar and Trinkov, it's just like an ocean of twos and threes for every element, including the triple loop, I believe, where she put her hand down, where I think pretty much any other skater would have gotten negative ones and twos for that kind of mistake.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's disappointing because they still would have easily won
Mhm.
if they had a few negative ones on that element or some zeros on a spin, or if they had components that were more in the 8.5 to 9 range, anything like that. And it didn't feel to me like the elements were really judged separately. It was just like they got one giant check mark for the program. And they do a lot of elements really well, but they're not the best in the world at every element. They struggle a little bit with like the pair spin, and his footwork can get a little bit scratchy on the lifts, like small things like that. And so I totally agree with you. I had the same feeling that like this is the second Olympics in a row now where I've really noticed it. It's only the third Olympics, I guess, of the IJS,
Mhm.
where there seems to be this push towards personal bests and world records.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's odd to me because I don't think the media cares about the scores. I don't think the general public understands the scores, and they certainly have no context for that information. And this isn't swimming, and so I think when there's big, like an 84 in pairs is not the same thing as an 84 in men's, and so I think like when they get blown up like that and the scores really explode at the Olympics, it's sort of a disservice to the skaters that it supposedly benefits, and it sort of opens them up for criticism that is pretty distracting. And if the PCS and the components had been judged fairly, I mean, sorry, if the components in the GOE had been judged fairly, I think it would have been the same result, and it wouldn't have been a cheaper or a tarnished gold medal in any way. What about you?
No, I thought everyone was skewed high, but I thought that the Russians were, the marks just got out of control. Especially because we've talked about their programs all year that a lot of people don't love. Jesus Christ Superstar. I know that Ingo Stoyer was really upset about the part of the middle section where, Tatiana is crossing herself and there's just a real breather before the second half. And you look at their choreography marks and it's a 9.79, which means that they got a majority of tens
A lot of
for
tens,
a lot
yeah.
of tens, and a lot of 9.75s. And then for interpretation, 9.96. Now, Sandra Bezic had these really curious marks because she was saying that it was a reserve performance and it was measured, and yet their emotions were open. I was like, what are you, Sandra? What are you saying? You're getting lost in your words here. Like, was it, I felt that the media, because they are amazing, wanted to build them up, perhaps as being even more amazing. I felt that NBC's angle of getting people to watch pair skating was like, watch the greatest pair skater, the greatest pair ever,
Yeah.
and tune in because the U.S. doesn't have a prayer at medaling. And I think that they showed that what we really do care about in the U.S. is seeing Americans medal, and we didn't really see any of the pair competition. And I thought that it was probably one of the best pair competitions I've seen in a while. I thought that there were many teams that performed with quality, and I thought that that's something where in the past CBS probably would have shown it in 1998, or CBS in the early 90s, or ABC in the 80s, but it's a different era, unfortunately. You know.
Well, I think we have to sort of re-examine our idea about like
Mhm.
this is in Albertville, 1992, with tape delayed coverage. Like the nightly recaps are really recaps, and they're
Mhm.
not because they're showing it live. I think they feel they can get away with just showing the top four, especially when there's no Americans in contention.
Mhm. I have a little bit of a different take, only in the sense that I think that they believe that the X Games are more popular, and the more popular the X Games become, I believe that that's not necessarily
Mm,
great for figure skating in terms of Olympic coverage, because you'll
that's true.
see where they do spend more time, and they'll spend more time showing people there who aren't necessarily medal contenders. And just even in the previews of the games, they were, when they show the commercials, and it used to be skater, 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 and skier and hockey. There's a lot of X Games type coverage, and while that's great for the X Games, I don't think it's great for figure skating. So I think it just puts it into context where maybe they feel that those sports are more current and more in touch with the
Mm.
now and today, and that skating's a little bit dated. But yeah, I did think it was interesting. I definitely think it's a change of the times that Jesus Christ Superstar won the Olympics, and they're a fantastic pair. Again, I didn't think that their waltz. I know a lot of people love the Masquerade Waltz. I don't think it's that fantastic. I think they are fantastic, but I have to say I've never completely bought into any of their programs. Mm.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with you there. I think that's disappointing as well because
Mhm.
they are a world class pair and they're the best pair of the
Mhm.
last 20 years maybe.
Yeah.
But these aren't programs I'm going to revisit
No.
in the future. Yeah.
No, and I think it's interesting. Obviously their coach, Nina Mosier, is now probably the top pair coach in the
Hmm.
world. And 4 years ago, no one really knew who she was
Yeah.
outside of, the hardcore fans or Russia. But I mean, her second place pair, Stolbova and Klimov, won the silver medal here. They've been working with her for less than a year,
Hmm.
and she brought them up. Many people did not expect them to win medals. Certainly, they were not expected to win the silver. What did you think of them? Do you think that they are a silver medal pair? This is very divisive for people. People were very shocked that they were in third
Hmm.
after the short program.
Yeah, I think I'm of two minds about it. On one hand, it was a very convincing performance, especially in real time, and it was fearlessly skated.
Mhm.
And I think there's probably a case to be made that it was the best long program of the night. On the other hand, this is a team that is very young
Mhm.
and has never been to the World Championships. And I think they had an okay Grand Prix this year where they finished third and fourth. And then the real breakthrough was when they won the long program at Europeans.
Mhm.
And I think if this was a random pair from a country like Austria with a resume that thin, no matter how well they skated, I don't think that components in the nines would have been available to them. And so that so I go back and forth, and I also think maybe if you take this program out of Russia and you skate it at like a random neutral location and you put it side by side with like more Towers Moskovich, I'm not sure how much better it is. I think it's probably better, but I'm not sure. And they really rode a wave here of support, and they were really not under the same pressure as Voloshazar and Trenkov. They weren't expected to medal. So
I mean, I do think that the Russian pair skating, a lot of their technique and their unison is better than what the other teams do. But I agree with you in the fact that I don't think that necessarily the Adams family was the performance that was worthy of nines. But I did think that they were exceptional. How much do you think
mm-hmm.
that their performance in the team event, backing it up to Europeans, kind of changed their perception? Obviously, they're in Russia, so they're a hometown team. They came off a very strong performance at Europeans. I felt that they backed it up in the long program in the team event, and then they come here. Did that team event kind of help boost their reputation up a little bit higher?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Along with the European Song program and those two
Hmm.
programs back to back. I mean, that's a quick turnaround to boost your reputation by as much as
Hmm.
as much as it did. But absolutely, the team event was a huge boost for them.
Hmm.
Huge.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way, that they were gaining so much momentum after the team event. I'm like, they're gonna medal, they're gonna medal, and
Hmm.
then silver. I mean, it just the way that the points went down in the short. I'm like, I don't think the Germans are a lock, and then
Hmm.
boom, it happened like that. It was interesting to see it happen. But one thing about this pair is I certainly they're very young. Obviously, you know, she was born in 1992. He's a 1990 baby, so they're in their early 20s, and I
Yeah,
certainly expect them to be around for the next 4 years, and I expect them to be the world champions probably for the
absolutely.
next couple of seasons.
Hmm.
I think that the Russians are going to stay at the top in pair skating. Especially, I think they have their dream. They have a team on top and another one
Hmm.
right coming up behind them, and I don't think it's going to be a Bazarov Larionov ever as the top team. I think that it's really they have the feeding system at least back right now. Whether that
Hmm.
continues will be interesting. But yeah, I didn't. I wasn't convinced by the Adams family, but again, it's a new year. It's 2014.
Yeah.
Maybe we just the standards felt like they were just being thrown out left and right. Things were a little bit different.
Yeah, it's the second year they used that program. And
Yeah,
it was also I thought it was a little bit surreal to watch the Olympics in Russia and to see the Adams family and Jesus Christ Superstar back to back from the two top Russian teams.
yeah,
You know, it was funny.
yeah. Especially, I felt like our teams, like in ice dance, you see how concerned everyone is having a Russian composer. Or, it's just like
Exactly.
it so doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, at least it didn't for them. But another team, I think that a lot of people are talking about are Savchenko and Solkoe and their bronze medal. People thought, should they have been higher? Should they have been lower? What did you make of their performance? People said that it was heartbreaking. And I was of the mind that if you're going to turn around yesterday and say that their bronze medal performance was heartbreaking, I'm wondering where everyone has been for the last 2 years, because I certainly have seen it coming. You know, I think you look at the 2012 World Championships, or even 2011, that I felt
Hmm.
like their days have been numbered for some time, and that they did get past, and that it maybe wasn't really catchable. What is your take on their performance the last 2 years?
Well, I think it is heartbreaking. I don't think it was a
Hmm.
surprise to anybody or to them.
Hmm.
Um, and I wonder, maybe it was better even to. It's the hyper cynical part of me feels like it was better to finish third with some mistakes instead of skating perfectly and feeling cheated or underscored. Um, I think what's heartbreaking about it is they've been a great team for for 2 years, for 8 years, for
Yeah.
two quadrenniums in a row, and they both times they've managed to peak kind of right in the middle of the Olympic cycle.
Hmm.
And 4 years ago, it was Shen and Zhao that came back at the last minute and really, left them behind. And this juggernaut of Voloshyazar and Trenkov hasn't been as abrupt, but I think they've kind of been they've been feeling really helpless, especially the last 2 years, and they've tried a lot of different things.
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of criticism of the programs and sort of getting away from what makes them special. But I'm sympathetic. I think, when you're in that position, you have to try stuff. You have to try a lot of different things. You're not just going to give up.
Hmm.
So I think before they started the program, it seemed like they were a little bit resigned to the fact and they were holding hands and talking to each other. And I felt maybe I was projecting, but I felt like there was a moment of recognition between them. And so this is their last performance. I hope they go to Worlds next month. I read this morning that Aliona wants to, but she has to convince Robin. So we'll see.
Of course she does. But I found it interesting when you look back, is that I've always considered them to be the more performative pair, rather, and to consider Volozhar and Trankov to be far more technical. And it was something that just started to shift over time. Volozhar and Trankov, I would say in 2012, probably did have their best programs with the Black Swan and the Evanescence. I don't think that they've ever achieved greatness in terms of programs, but
Right.
I do feel that Savchenko and Soko we have, they're not as perfect of a pair. They're a wonderful pair, but their lines don't match perfectly, and they're not two dream people that you would come up with in a lab to put together like Volozhar and Trenkov. But I feel that there's more of a warmth and a relationship with the audience, certainly, that
Yeah.
than Volozhar and Trenkov have. But I think that in the process of trying to beat Volozhar and Trenkov, I agree with you. I think that they've cut out what they're good at. When you look at the last 2 years, if you look back, they brought back obviously the Pink Panther program, and they made it a short program. And I know that Scott Hamilton said on TV that he thought they were panicking, and I thought it was the right decision. I mean, you're supposed to just sit there and lay there and let this other team win. I felt that that was probably a good decision that they should have done earlier in the year.
Mhm.
I would have scrapped that Nutcracker program too. I didn't think it was effective the first time I saw it, and I still feel that it wasn't them. I mean, why not bring back the Peanut program? I mean, I think that that was really their pinnacle, and I would have just
Yeah,
completely, skipped their second Grand Prix, the Grand Prix final, and made it some. I mean, this team is really great, but I think they've gotten so fixated on that throw triple axel, which who knows if they ever needed it. I
right,
mean, but then again, with the judging, who knows? I mean, there's so many different factors at play, but it is sad to see them never win an Olympic gold medal. They're
right.
certainly worthy of that, but I
But
don't.
they have. I mean, the Peanut program is probably the best Paris long program of the IJS era, at least. And then I also really loved their Cirque du Soleil program. I think 2008, and
Mhm,
those are programs that I think will stand up.
mhm.
10 or 15 years from now, and I don't think that Beloshazar and Trenkov have that material.
No, I agree with you. I think that people will remember Aliona and Robin really as
Hmm.
kind of the top team of this decade, rather than along with Shen and Zhao, rather than Veloso and Trankov. I think that Veloso and Trankov are wonderful, but they don't have that history, and it'll be interesting to see if they continue or
Yeah,
not for a season or two, because that could obviously change things. But I don't know if they're as good of competitors as Aliona and Robin are. The one thing I noticed about Tatiana Max is that they were tight on the throws in the long, and they messed up at Worlds last year when they have the pressure on them to win. And I think Aliona is more of a competitor. And one thing I think is interesting is that people have always compared Tatiana and Aliona, and I was wondering if NBC would go that route, and they didn't really delve into it. But I think it's interesting that they both come from the same
Ukraine.
coach in Ukraine, who
Hmm.
is actually coached by Nina Moser's mother. And then that woman, Galina Kokar, was then coached by Stanislav Zuk. But all of these skaters have that same technique, and I think they're all at the top, and it's just the same feeding system in Russia, and they're all great. And I think it's
Yeah,
certainly, I think that it was a real victory for the School of Russian Pairs Skating. What did you think about Pang and Tong? Because I'm kind of two minds about them. I think that there's a group thinking that can happen in skating where if people are seen on the medal podium forever, you almost cannot take them off of it. It's like, well, are you not going to give the Germans a medal? But do you think that Pang and Tong earned the bronze medal based on their performance here?
I think there's a case to be made that they deserve the bronze medal.
Hmm.
I think they were probably underscored comparatively
Hmm.
on the components. I think the Les Mis program it's very strong compositionally,
Hmm.
and I think their skating to me it's a little bit dated, not in a bad way necessarily, but I think you notice it most on the lifts where
Hmm.
they don't do the crazy IJS lifts with 17 position changes. Um, but they really had their moment 4 years ago when they skated that perfect long program in Vancouver. And hopefully they'll get to retire this time. And there are enough good Chinese teams coming up. I think that they will be able to.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt sorry for them. I do feel like they were trying to recapture 4 years ago, just in terms of how similar the programs were, at least musically, to what they did in Vancouver. Picking a real sweeping song like that,
Yeah.
really going for the moment. I don't know if they really had the magic uh, in the free skate here, but I do think that I did feel like they were scored very conservatively,
Yeah.
especially when you look at how Stolbova and Klimov were scored
Mhm.
in terms of components.
Yeah.
Especially, I felt if you want to give Stolbova and Klimov higher technical marks, sure, but I thought in components, I felt like they were
Hmm.
really kind of like turning the book on a team that has really shown up and did some really great material. So I was sad to see that.
Hmm.
I feel a little bit strangely about them finishing in fourth place. I'm not sure if I feel like they were robbed outright or how to rank that, but I think that the fact that Aliona and Robin still got in the nines, in the high eights and
Hmm.
nines for their performance to the Nutcracker, which felt disjointed, and they switched to the throw triple axel, and there's the big setup, and to me, it's just the
Hmm.
IJS. I don't know. I don't feel like they used the rules in place. But looking ahead, what did you think of the judging of the two Canadians, and what do you make of these two pairs?
Again, I think there's another case to be made that More Towers Moscovich got a bit hosed
Hmm.
and could have at least finished fourth or third.
Yeah.
And I think their short program in particular is really excellent. It's,
Hmm.
I think, one of the strongest, if not the strongest, of this group. And it's just jam packed with transitions, and there's not a lot of crossovers between the elements. The
Hmm.
long program is a little bit more open, but they really have some of the most difficult lifts in the competition. And I wish they could have been more rewarded for that. I mean, they did get a lot of twos, but I would have given more threes.
Hmm.
Um, but they did well here. I wonder. I know he's pushing 30,
Hmm.
and so I wonder, do they have 4 more years in them? I would love to see them continue. I think that they're just in the last year or two really coming into their own, and so yeah, I feel like they got underscored here by a bit. What about you?
No, I definitely feel like they were underscored here, but I do feel like they made a strong case that they are the better Canadian team, at least as seen by the judges, especially certainly in the free skate. But there are so many wonderful qualities about their skating. They don't have the complex transitions of the other teams, but I do like the clean simplicity of their skating. I feel like they execute things with a lot of quality. They have really strong landing edges. Everything that they do
Hmm.
is really clean and precise, and I find it charming. I find they have really
Yeah.
great chemistry. They're a well matched team. They're two people that should be skating together, and I
Hmm.
there's just something really pleasant about the way that they skate, and I hope that they do compete at the World Championships and perhaps next year, the next couple of years, because I think that they have wonderful quality to them. Aside
Hmm.
from her having a mistake in the team event, but they were fantastic here, and
Yeah.
he was a triple Salchow away from a perfect program. In the free
Hmm.
skate, and their lifts in person are so impressive. So
Yeah.
I hope that they do continue. Do you think that Megan and Eric will continue?
Um, I mean, my guess is they won't, but
Hmm.
I mean, one thing that's good is they did skate really, really well in the team event in that short
Hmm.
program, and that was a really cool moment. And so I was really pleased for them. It's been a hard year for them,
Hmm.
and I wonder, if that bronze medal at the Worlds was kind of a curse in one sense, because they skated so stressed out all year.
Hmm.
And when you win the world bronze medal, then you go to the Grand Prix, and then you're the top ranked team there, and you're expected to win. They're not the most beautifully matched team out there.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know about you, but I get really soft at the Olympics, and I want everybody to do well. And you can see how hard they've worked when you watch them, and maybe that's
Hmm.
part of the problem. It doesn't look effortless, but I mean they're really hard workers. They've been skating for so many years together, but mostly separately. And so I'm glad they had that team medal. It's a situation where I feel like, oh, okay, well they still have an Olympic medal.
Hmm.
What about you?
I agree. Even though they have the silver medal from the team event, I felt like perhaps they were more relaxed. They had some mistakes in the short program, and they didn't seem quite as devastated as I believe they would have been had they made those mistakes without a team
Hmm.
event and a medal to go along with it. It seemed like they were able to relax and enjoy the experience a little bit more. They had to probably have known that a medal was unlikely coming in here, but they certainly seem like a very competitive couple who
Hmm.
want to win, and I certainly respect the difficulty that they have gone through. I think that it was great that they did have the short program moment in the team event.
Yeah.
I mean, they were wonderful there. It just didn't happen in the individual event. It was both programs. They were really thinking through it. They didn't seem to just. It was almost like they let go in the team event, and you could see them thinking. She gets ahead of him sometimes when they skate in competition with the nerves and in the footwork. She tripped and was looking at
Yeah.
him, and he had an issue with the Lutz. And then I felt in the free skate, she again was a little bit ahead of him at certain points, or you can see them looking at each other where it's just like not natural ever, And I feel like they got the bronze medal last year and they wanted to build off of it. I think that that's really admirable. I also think that there was a huge target on their back. And you talk
Hmm.
about how with another team, Stolbova and Klimov, if Megan and Eric wanted to make a push for higher on the podium, it's going to be much harder for them than how the Russians just swooped up in there,
Yeah.
to happen. I mean, you have to feel for someone like them. They've certainly put in the work. They're not as wonderfully matched. They're not. And I think that they're not probably not two people that maybe should be skating together, but you have to respect the work that they did. I
Yes.
think that they
Yeah.
got in their heads even with the program creation. Talk about them being all about the points, and I think that they tried to find a style and tried to be quirky with Alice in Wonderland, and I just felt like that program never worked ever. And I think they made the most of it.
Yeah.
But again, like even when she's ending the program and she was kind of waiting to jump into his arms for the last pose, it didn't sing to me. You know, it wasn't effortless. It just never cohesively came together. I
Yeah.
feel like that's really the course of their season. Whereas last year, it seemed like everything was working last year. Just, I mean, they were consistent. They just built from competition
Yeah.
to competition, and it just didn't happen. And you think of, I feel bad for them, and I
Hmm.
didn't enjoy their skating as much this season, and I feel badly about that. But yeah, again, it just something was off all season with that
Yeah.
team. But looking ahead, the Americans obviously had a strong finish here. Obviously for Marissa and Simon, I think that finishing within the top 10 is probably better than certain people expected. What did you make of their performance here?
Well, for Marissa and Simon and for Felicia and Nate,
Mm-hmm.
they think it was really kind of the best they could have hoped for, and I think they
Mm-hmm.
should be really proud of what happened. Marissa and Simon were ninth here, I believe, and 13th or something, 14th at Worlds last year. So, and that's after having a really difficult fall season this year, where it was really in question that whether they would even be on the team. So I think it's really the best they could have hoped for.
Yeah.
You?
Oh, absolutely. And for Felicia and Nate, there was a lot of debate whether or not they should have been here. Denny and Coughlin should have been taken, whether it even mattered one way or the other. And I feel like they did the best that they could have done here.
Hmm.
I also think that the commentators, when they started showing the throws and showing the different quality between the two teams, really kind of showed about why we're not as good at pair skating as the other. I mean, we just don't have the same level of quality in our skating. And I was wondering what you think the U.S. needs to do to improve in the future, because I feel like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the US was in the medal conversation. They weren't necessarily on the podium, but they had a seat at the table where they at least was a possibility.
Yeah.
Ina and Zimmerman, Ina and Dungeon, Mino and Sand, them with
Hmm.
their old partners. Back to Peter Oppergaard, there was the Crothers, the US was at least always in the top six. So
Yeah.
what do you think is the problem? Because I know that people think our pairs just need to stay together. And I think that that's a really simple way of looking at it.
I think there's a lot of issues involved,
Mm-hmm.
of course, and the most obvious one for me, I think, is this ethos in the U.S. It's a very American thing that pair skating is for failed single skaters,
Mm-hmm.
and that anybody with a triple toe loop can fall back on pairs when they hit the ceiling on their singles career.
Mm-hmm.
And until something is done to sort of explode that mentality, it's really going to be an uphill battle. I think it might take, a Meryl and Charlie of U.S.
Mm-hmm.
pair skating to capture the imagination. And I mean, nobody looks at Meryl and Charlie and thinks like, I wish they were single skaters,
Yeah.
you know. And it's been a hard quadrennium for U.S. pairs. It's been a hard 12 years really since Ina and Zimmerman retired. But this 4 years in particular, I think, was hard with Ian Kaskus and Coughlin splitting right in 2011 after finishing sixth at Worlds, which in a really deep field. And the next year, Marley and Brubaker split. And so there have been some disappointments. And so, yeah, it's a good question. What needs to happen? I don't know if it's a coaching issue. I think the larger issue is what I just said about sort of the psychology of pair skating in this country.
Mm-hmm.
You?
I think it is, but I think it's two things. I think it's one, the psychology of pair skating, and two, the coaching. And I think that those really go hand in hand, because if you look at ice dance, they used to be the jokes of U.S.
Yeah.
skating. Aside from Punslin and Swallow, the other ice dancers at nationals were really almost laughed at for years. And they got much better once Igor and Marina really built that program. Obviously, Igor was with Liz Coates before, and the results crept up and up. And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
the change to the IJS helped them immensely, as well as Marina's connections along with Igor's connections, putting those together. So I think that ice dance became respected. You talk about no one looks at Marilyn Charlie as failed single skaters. No one did with Kenneth either. And
Yeah.
ice dance is now respected in this
Mm-hmm.
country. And the more it's respected, the more people invest in it, the more people want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the pairs in this country have almost taken the place of how ice dance used to be thought of and treated. And
Mm-hmm.
it's now, the ugly step sibling of US skating. And I don't think that it needs to be. But I
Right.
do think that there is a problem with the coaching as well. I think if you watch the Russian pairs, I mean, they skated to Jesus Christ Superstar and they skated to the Adams Family, and it didn't matter because they had inherent quality it didn't matter that the programs were shit,
Hmm.
and it just like it didn't matter because what they did was so great, and I think that our coaches just don't have that same experience. I don't think that they are really masters in pairing people together the way that the Russians put the people together. I mean, I don't think that they ever would put Megan and Eric together. I don't think that they would have ever wasted any time on putting Castelli and Schnapier together when they're never going to just match in that way. It seemed like they match people better there and they have more of a science to it. So I think that and they all have the same technique, or at least of a couple of options, whereas we have so many different options of technique. It's far less uniforms.
No, it's a good point. Yeah. And I think also, after the end of the Soviet Union, there was a lot of Russian coaches who came over to the US, pairs coaches like Mosfina or Oleg Vasiliev. And now Mr. Nix is retired. So I think there's sort of I'm not really sure, like, are Mito and San going to be the next pairs? I mean, who would you send your daughter to skate pairs with,
I've thought about that actually, and I think that there are two real options. I like what Tim and Didi have done, and
Yes,
I think that they have a
absolutely.
coach. Their coach is Russian, but he
Hmm.
seems like he knows what he's doing. And if I wasn't going to go that route, I really would look at Mino and Sand because I just think that they have the knowledge of they worked with Knicks and they also worked with Irina Rodnina and they were around for a long time and they have experience as competitors and
Hmm.
with packaging teams in the way that I'm sorry the other coaches don't seem to have. I think that some of them are getting better, but maybe they have the packaging and not the technical or, and they don't just put it all together. And I think that there needs to be that. Obviously, John Zimmerman, I liked what he did
Yeah.
when Katie Denny went with him. I thought that, he obviously had I thought that he improved, even though the results didn't in 2011. I saw improvement in their skating. Uh, Unfortunately, it was just the cards that were dealt that year. But again, I don't think that Moscovino, while she was here and Ina and Zimmerman were great, she wasn't here for that long and she didn't really build up any younger teams and or future generations of coaches because they didn't spend that long with her the way that Oleg Vasiliev was with her for years and then goes off and becomes a top coach and has all of that knowledge. And the other coaches internationally do go to college to be coaches and they have that knowledge as well. And I think that we're fighting a bit of a losing battle in pairs, which has more of a science to it, perhaps, than some of the
Hmm.
singles. So I think it's going to be interesting. But I also wonder about our single skaters. I mean, who besides Frank Carroll, looking forward, who would you send your kid to if you had a talented kid that you wanted to medal? Because once Frank retires,
Hmm.
I'm wondering where the coaching are because for so many years Carlo was a great coach, who people would send their kids to. John Nix, Frank Carroll. Do we have singles coaches that are really going to take that mantle?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think it's very streaky. Like, who's the hot coach of the minute? And right now, maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's Corey Aid. And 2 or 3 years ago, it was Jason and Yuka Sato.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. I mean, I think Frank is still the venerable sort of. I hate to call him like a Bella Caroli type of
Mm-hmm.
U.S. skating. And so, who takes his place? I think it's a good question. I don't know, but I'm not. I'm not pessimistic about it. I do think there's a shift now, and I think skaters can stay longer with their childhood coach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. What about you?
I don't know. When I was watching U.S. Nationals, I felt that we had a lot of talent, especially in the men. I felt like there were more kids there with obvious talent coming through. But I was looking at Tammy Gamble, and all summer people kept talking about how she and Justin Dillon were so connected that their kids were going to be so good at nationals this year. And I thought, like, they have 1 million students at the junior and senior level. Like, how is this possibly going to work where everyone's going to get the level of coaching that they need? And then you watch throughout the season, she's traveling to every single competition and the kids are all getting injured and you're just wondering like what is happening. And it doesn't seem like that is working. You seem like someone like Karen Chen is a real talent, but she didn't have a great nationals and there were injuries. But I don't think that her material ever matched what her level of talent. So I think it's going to be interesting because I think you see there's so many coaches who are good at certain things. Like Tom's really great at jumps, but he doesn't put the whole package together, and they don't have the the second mark. And you just look at where that's going to be. I think that there's really an opening, but it's going to be interesting to see where the next coach emerges from because I think that so much of the success does come from the coaching and their knowledge and just their experience. So, there
Hmm.
need to be coaches to get that experience. I think it's interesting. If it was just Jason Brown, I would think that Corey Ade was just, the next, this year's Robin Wagner. But I think that, or, you can, Jason, but I think the fact that Jordan Mueller is doing well
Hmm.
certainly is a plus in her corner to make her someone that we can think about. But I think that it's going to be who's going to really take the mantle for the U.S.
Hmm.
So. Well, we obviously want to know what all of you think. We are going to be watching this competition throughout the next couple of weeks. We're certainly excited for the Olympic Games. Emily, thank you so much for being
Thank you,
here.
Dave. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so as always, we want to remind you to hold an edge, get in touch with Jesus Christ Superstar, and look sexy. Bye, guys.
Bye.